Everybody, we're going to be talking about the Stanford personal statement part of the transfer application today. But before we do that, I want to disclaim something really quickly. I'm not here to tell you how to answer questions in order to get into Stanford. I can't do that. I don't know how to get people into Stanford. If I did, I'd probably not be making YouTube videos with 300 subscribers. I'd probably be cashing in millions of dollars, getting extremely wealthy people's kids into Stanford who were not wealthy enough to donate a building. So with that being said, what I hope to achieve is just to allow people to contextualize their experiences a little bit better by giving them practical and also sort of esoteric ways of looking at their experiences and being able to talk about them with more conviction that makes it a lot more obvious to the institution what value they bring. So that's what I'm hoping to achieve here. With that being said, let's dive into the content of the video, which is let's address this particular question. Please provide a statement that addresses your reasons for transferring and the objectives you hope to achieve. 650 word maximum. So we have three things here that we're going to talk about, each with their own practical component of how to actually answer this kind of question. So you have two camps here. They're like, okay, I can answer the really specific stuff really easily, and then the open-ended stuff is really hard, or the opposite. In this case, with these kinds of questions are sometimes interpreted as very close-ended and also sometimes interpreted as very open-ended. So hopefully what we can talk about today is going to be generalizable to both camps or categories of people. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to dissect the question. What is actually being asked here? So the two words that we want to be looking at are, well, I guess this is a phrase, but reasons for transferring and objectives. So I want us to be aware that you can be as obnoxiously meta with your interpretation of these things, because reasons for transferring is very loosely defined, and so are objectives. It's important to recognize that, because oftentimes it's easy to constrain yourself into thinking specifically in the context of an admissions officer reading your paper, getting you into the college, because fundamentally the entire purpose, all of the application is a why us, why you. It is, they want to know, why are you applying to us against a peer institution, and why should we admit you over your peer applicant? So that is a constant sort of dynamic that's existing in all of the questions. So just be aware of that. So with that in mind, break free of the idea that everything that is being asked is in the context of college, because you might be looking at reasons for transferring and think, okay, only academic. Or you might be looking at objectives and thinking only at the institution that you're applying to. We have somebody who attends our office hours who wants to be a doctor. And in order to be a doctor, you need to do pre-medical requirements. And in this case, an undergraduate education literally is a stepping stone, but that's okay, because universities are stepping stones by definition. Stanford knows it's a stepping stone. Whether or not you want to tell them that to their faces, maybe there's a probably more tactful way to do that. But your objectives don't have to be limited to the things you want to do at Stanford. Your reasons don't have to be exclusively academic reasons for why you want to leave your current institution. So just think about them a little bit more expansively, look a little bit more further ahead in the future. Think about, your reasons could be because, like, at least for me, like, I'm a first generation college student, and I wanted to, build a future, build a foundation of education for my family. And like that is strictly non-academic in the sense that, like, I didn't want to transfer because I wanted to have more academic resources, like because I wanted a bigger library, or because I wanted to have smaller classes. It's because it's something as abstract as, securing a better educational future for my kids whenever I have them, God, hopefully 20 years from now. So just think about these things with a little bit less specificity, and you might feel a little bit more liberated to kind of approach it in a more meaningful way to you personally. So for the next component, what do I have in my personal arsenal to address what is being asked? So this is when your free writing, your journaling, and your dedicated introspection is going to come into play, because it is your job to do your own homework on yourself and to have a good grasp on what are my past experiences, what am I currently doing, what are my future plans, and then how to blend these things into a sensible way that makes sense to answer that why us, why you fundamental question that exists in these applications. So when I talked about those writing exercises in my previous video, this is where these are going to really start making their money, because this question honestly is sort of an abstraction of something that you'll see in a lot of other essays. This kind of encompasses, you can mash together a lot of other short answers and get this same substance basically. But so like it is, if you wanted to approach this question, you need to break it down, and you need to know what sort of pieces you can put together that actually make a sensible response to the underlying question that is being asked. And the only way you're going to do that, at least in a meaningful way, is by doing the work, by doing these writing exercises, by thinking about it and having something to work with. So, excuse me. So in this particular case, this is where all of that writing is going to come into play. You're going to have a better understanding of, based on whatever underlying question you're trying to address, you have all these pieces that you can then bring together and formulate a meaningful response. So lastly, you got to ask yourself, like, does it make sense? And this is when the multiple draft process is going to come into play. This is when you're going to be reaching out to people who are unbiased, ideally, and ask them, does this make sense? Because ultimately, it is your job as the applicant to make it abundantly clear to the admissions officer or to your reader why whatever you're including is important to you. Because when you're limited in space like this, what you choose to include at the exclusion of other things, that speaks volumes. But you also cannot assume that the admissions officer knows the significance of what you're talking about just by default, because all they're working off of is what is included in the application. And don't assume that they're culturally aware or spun up enough to know what it means for your particular situation to you. That is your job. And it is also your job to bridge the past, present, and future in a way that is sensible for that question of the why us, why you. If to put it in another way, certain things are more significant given the context of or the conditions in which they arose. So I think a great example of this is if you see people, I'll just use a personal example. So I had an okay transfer GPA, certainly a lot lower than a lot of my peers. But in the context of where I got my transfer GPA, which is at the Defense Language Institute in the Arabic program, it is very rare for people to graduate with higher than like 3.7-ish GPAs. Like 3.7 is really, really, really good. So it was my responsibility. And this is, of course, like not a very high stakes, but a very literal example. It was my job to make it clear that whatever GPA that I had was not actually like below average. It was actually well above average and was in the top, like well into the top of the performance that you typically would see out of like honor graduates for this particular institution. So that is just like one very specific example where without context, without like setting up the importance of it, it doesn't help me and it would have hurt me. So with that being said, the same thing can kind of generally be applied to any particular life occurrence that you might talk about in your essay. And this might be a little bit morbid, but just to drive the point home a little bit more, imagine if you just talked about like your neighbor passing away. If you don't, and this is a hypothetical situation, of course, but if your neighbor was somebody who played a parental role in your life and was extremely involved in you being raised because perhaps your parents weren't around or there were other conditions that made it difficult for you to have a strong connection with your family, and you were raised essentially by your neighbors or by your aunt or by your uncle, is not as readily clear to somebody who doesn't understand that holds that much significance. So once again, it is your job to make a complete stranger aware of the significant things in your life and why it's important towards you building whatever future that you are imagining. So to recap, it is on you to make sure that you're allocating whatever space that you have in your essay in an appropriate way where you are touching base. And this is, of course, not always the case, but generally speaking, where you need to provide the context for why something's important, the past, like how it's changed you and how you live life now, which is the present, and what you want to do with that. How does that help you? How does that arm you to be a better, more capable person to do a certain job or to carry out a certain task than somebody else because of that experience, which is the future? So, and it's obviously not easy, but you have very limited space, and that's sort of the golden skill to have, is how do you balance these different elements to, of course, paint yourself in the best light, but also make it as abundantly clear to the person reading who doesn't know you, why you're qualified and why you bring value to the table. So these are the three things. And of course, kind of going back to the practical side of this, this is why coming to office hours is really helpful. I think that I can imagine that a lot of people who are looking to apply to transfer to Stanford are hesitant to tell people that they're planning on doing that because of what those other people might say. And it is frankly bullshit that we live in a society it's bullshit that we're in a position where you don't feel like you can be, you feel like you're going to be judged for wanting to better yourself or wanting to apply to a place like this without essentially getting shit on by whether it's strangers on the internet, on College Confidential or Reddit or whatever, or even people you might consider your colleagues or friends. So finding somebody who's unbiased, who can just plainly tell you, okay, based on this writing, it is not clear to me, or it is clear to me why this is important to you, will be helpful. And you can find other people like this at these office hour sessions. So once again, I really encourage you to join that community where people are just genuinely interested in helping each other and benefiting one another, regardless of whether or not they're competing for limited spots at Stanford. So that's going to conclude this video. Thank you guys for watching. I'm going to be doing this alongside the exercises that we're doing in the office hour sessions. So if you, for some reason, cannot attend, you can still get some of the value that we're talking about. It's not going to replicate the entire experience, of course, but I want to be able to provide this kind of resource regardless. And once again, not trying to get people into Stanford, not trying to get people into Harvard or whatever university they're trying to apply to. I just want people to be able to understand that they do have value and be able to write about it in a more convincing manner to both themselves and to an admissions officer. So hopefully you found some value in this video, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.